Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Snyder on Sports, Episode 4. Tonight, I'd like to take a chance to dive deep into a nice, juicy topic in the sports world. Lately, we've heard a lot about the coaching change that took place with the Cleveland Cavaliers. David Blatt out, Tyronn Lue in. What I'd like to do tonight is kind of step back a little bit, get more of a big picture, and ask some questions about the phenomenon behind, the coaching changes in the NBA. So I kind of sat back and tried to think of some questions that I wanted to answer related to this topic. I came up with 4. Number 1, why do certain players in the NBA exert so much influence in coaching changes? Number 2, why do some elite NBA players become known as coach killers and other elite players do not? What role does the media play in these controversial coaching changes? And finally, why is it the nature of a head coaching job in the NBA is so different as it relates to job security when compared to similar jobs in the NFL or Major League Baseball? So, we want to get started on this. Why do certain players in the NBA, elite players, exert so much influence on the coaching changes? Now, you can hear different stories, different sources, different people saying, yes, LeBron did have a huge influence, or no, LeBron did not. So I thought I'd break it down along the lines of some of the more recent coaching changes in the NBA. And I made a little list here, starting off with last year, Tom Thibodeau, former head coach of the Chicago Bulls, had been there for 5 years, let go. To me, that particular change, maybe it was time. NBA coaches definitely have a shelf life, even the great ones. And, 5 years, did not make it to the promised land. Had a hell of a team, created a good program, but did not get the ultimate payoff. So I'm thinking maybe with that particular coaching change, you can kind of chalk that up to, maybe it's time, we need a change. I don't see any underlying motives for any of the players to try to get rid of Thibodeau. I just think it was time in that particular instance. The next one, Kevin McHale with the Rockets, the Houston Rockets, at the start of this year. Came as quite a surprise to everyone, and I think in this case, this was not only player influence, but definitely a GM influence as well. You had some elite players with the Rockets, James Harden, Dwight Howard, probably having a tough time learning to work together, not really buying into maybe what Kevin McHale had to say. And that was enough to put it over the edge because you also had a GM in place in Houston, Daryl Morey, definitely a numbers guy, definitely an analytics guy, not really a basketball background, never coached, never played. And he was up against, Kevin McHale, who is the ultimate old school guy. Played with the Celtics, long career, part of that amazing front line with Parrish and Bird. And he was a guy that, I think maybe never had that respect level for his GM, Daryl Morey, because he never played, never coached. And he definitely, Kevin McHale was averse to the analytics and the numbers behind it. He felt there was a lot more to the game than just these particular stats. He coached much more with his gut, I think. And so there was a definite butting of heads there. I don't think that was going to be avoidable, but I do strongly believe that the behavior of James Harden and Dwight Howard hastened his departure. It's kind of hard. You look at it and you think, man, last year, just the prior year, he took his team to the conference finals in the Western Division, and boom, he's out. So that's probably one that I think maybe definitely had some player influence along with GM influence. Of course, we have our most recent example, David Blatt with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like I said, different people will tell you different things, whether or not it was overt, covert, whatever you want to call it, I strongly believe that LeBron James had a hand in the demise of David Blatt. Now, maybe that was justified, maybe it wasn't, but LeBron held the power of influence in order to help that decision happen. So that one was most definitely player influenced, in my opinion. You go to Monty Williams of the Pelicans. Again, good young coach, but was not getting the results that the franchise wanted, especially with his young star, Anthony Davis. They thought they were going to get more out of it than they did. So I think, again, this might be similar to the Thibodeau firing. Maybe it was just time. I don't see any evidence of any kind of player influence there. You know, Anthony Davis is an up-and-coming star in the league, but he certainly does not have that kind of influence at this stage in his career to try to push for that kind of coaching change. So, again, that one's probably just, it was time. It was time for a change. Now we have another guy who, Stan Van Gundy. This guy, not once but twice, I believe, was forced out by players and or GMs. You go back to when he was the coach of the Miami Heat, and we had an instance there, again, he said, she said type of thing. Was it Shaq that forced him out? Was it Pat Riley, his boss, the GM, that forced him out? He definitely had personality conflicts with both. So again, I think that at a high level, definitely the player influence, that being Shaq, was part of the problem, was part of the reason why he was let go. And then again, Stan Van Gundy, Orlando Magic. This time, I think it was just purely player influence. It was Dwight Howard. And Stan Van Gundy is a great coach. He's had a great pedigree in the league. He definitely produces a winning product wherever he goes. But because of what Dwight Howard wanted at Orlando at the time, he had to go. Stan Van Gundy was the guy that had to go. So these are some of the examples, the recent examples of coaching changes. Some, like I said, caused by, just a time for a change, and others definitely influenced by players as well as GMs. So you got to look at it. It kind of divides itself here. You have certain superstar elite players that have the ability to influence personnel decisions, coaching changes, and they choose to exert that influence. But then you also have some who are just as elite, superstar elite players that either don't or choose not to exercise their ability to influence coaching changes. So there's some on either side of the fence. Now, if you look at the ones that do exert this influence, top of the list, in my opinion, has to be LeBron James. You also have James Harden, the Rockets situation, along with Dwight Howard, both with the Rockets and at Orlando with Stan Van Gundy. These are three definite, I think, most definite examples of players who are at the elite level in the league and choose to exert whatever power they have to make those coaching changes happen, to make them happy. Now, on the other side of the fence, I've got people like Steph Curry, obviously an elite player, Tim Duncan, another elite player, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Paul. All four of these guys are obviously elite players in the league. They have a lot of influence, but they choose not to or do not use that influence in a negative way as far as influencing coaching changes. And I think a lot of that has to do, you look at, okay, why LeBron James, James Harden, Dwight Howard do, and why do Curry, Duncan, Wade, and Paul do not? And I think it comes down to this. You look at each specific situation, players like Curry and Duncan, Dwayne Wade, Chris Paul, they all have extremely strong executives in their organization that pretty much aren't going to allow it. I mean, you look at someone like Tim Duncan, his makeup is not one to stir the boat or rock the boat anyway, but Greg Popovich is going to make his decision. He is not going to reach out to a player, say, hey, help me make this decision about who the coach is going to be, because he's also the president of the organization. So that's not going to happen there. Same with Dwayne Wade, Pat Riley. Come on, an icon in this league. You're not gonna rock the boat and push him. Say, hey, I'm your elite player. You need to make this change. It's not going to happen. Curry, again, Golden State Warriors have an extremely strong organization top to bottom. Everyone has their role, knows their role, and they don't try to be a power broker in any way, shape, or form. So, and again, it really isn't in Steph Curry's makeup either. He's not that kind of guy. He simply is not. Same goes for Chris Paul with the Clippers. You got Doc Rivers in place, not only coach, but president of the team. So it's just not going to happen that way for them. So I think a lot of times it's simply a matter of how strong is your organization, how strong are your executives, that they're going to either allow these elite players to sway their decision, or they're not going to allow it. It's as simple as that. So that's where I fall on, some do, some don't. That's kind of how it breaks down. You have people that are willing and able to take advantage of a situation, and they do. And that's too bad. Now, I think also you have to ask yourself in this, where does what role does the media play in these kind of situations where coaches are, for lack of a better term, run out of town? And I think by the very nature of the media, they play a significant role. Not to be too negative, but they're constantly stirring the pot. They're talking to one player or to a coach and saying, hey, did you hear what this guy said about you? Or what do you feel about this? They're constantly stirring that pot of controversy, trying to create controversy. And there may be a situation where if the media wasn't involved, when people just said, look, we're not going to fall into this trap, then a lot of these changes may not happen. But the media exerts a lot of influence, a lot of power. It's that constant stirring of the pot, that constant wanting to create controversy. And that never helps. That never improves a situation where, maybe if the parties sat down and talked, something could be achieved, something could be agreed upon. But because of the media, they never get that opportunity. It's too bad. I think it really does create a negative influence on a lot of the personnel decisions that you see in the league. So now that kind of explains why certain players do not become coach killers, as the term goes. And once you get that reputation as a coach killer, it's not going to help you either. Look at Dwight Howard. All the talent in the world, but his reputation at this point is at a low point in the league. He's known widely as a coach killer. No one wants him anymore, I don't think. He may be at the end of the line here with Houston. His skills have diminished a little bit. He's not getting any younger, and he's got that tag. He's a coach killer. So, you may think that at the prime of your career as a player, something like this power you wield is something that can be positive, but it can turn around and bite you in the butt just as easily. It's not all fun and games at that level. And you're playing a dangerous game, I think, as a player. To me, a player is a player. Their job is to play as productively for their team as they can and to help their team win ball games. It's not their place, I believe, to be involved in coaching decisions. That's the job of the executives of the organization, the general manager, etc., that they make those decisions. And I think that's how it should be. So you look at this situation where the NBA seems to stand out among the major types of sports in this country. If you look at basketball, baseball, and football. Now, if you're an NBA head coach, the job is so much different compared to the other sports in relation to job security, I think. Now, don't get me wrong, people get fired every day in the NFL too. Major League Baseball managers are let go. But there's something about the influence and the participation of the elite players that is much different in the NBA as compared to the NFL or MLB. And so I thought to myself, so what are the reasons behind this? Why is it so different from sport to sport? Why can star players in the NBA exert such personal influence on these coaching changes to where that's all you hear about? That's the first thing that you ask yourself every time a coach is let go in the NBA. So, was a player behind it? Did so-and-so do stuff to undermine the authority of that coach because he wanted to see him gone? And when you think about it, you talk about NFL or MLB, that particular conversation never comes up. You know, if an NFL coach is fired, you never have to ask the question, well, was one of the players behind it? MLB, even more so. You would it's kind of out of the realm of possibility that a player would exert that much influence in Major League Baseball that he could get a coach or a manager fired. These are some of the reasons I think behind the fact that the NBA is a unique situation. It's a unique situation. When you think about the fact that in the NBA, just by the nature of the size of the teams and then the nature of the amount of talent in the league, there are much fewer elite players in the NBA in relation to the NFL or MLB. There's a handful. I mean, when I went down the list of coach killers or not coach killers, you know, LeBron James, James Harden, Dwight Howard, Steph Curry, Tim Duncan, Dwayne Wade, Chris Paul, you know, that kind of, I mean, outside of probably the only ones I didn't mention would have been in Oklahoma City, Kevin Durant, Westwood, but there's so few elite players in the National Basketball Association that they exert much more influence because there's not as many of them to go around, and they make such an impact on your team. When you have Durant and Westbrook, when you have Chris Paul, when you have Steph Curry, when you have LeBron James, when you have James Harden, that's a leg up on the rest of the teams in the league. There's not that many superstar elite players in the NBA to go around. So it makes their place in the league inordinately large. Their influence is inordinately large compared to how many of them there are. So you have a very small base, a very small population, shall we say, of superstar elite players in the NBA, and you couple that with the fact that they all have guaranteed contracts, which is very different, the polar opposite of what happens in the NFL, right? There are no guaranteed contracts in the NFL. Top level players are cut at a moment's notice in the NFL. There is no guaranteed money in the NFL. And in the NBA, it's all guaranteed money. So again, that's going to figure into the decision-making process. If you have a team that is not doing well, is underperforming, not getting what you want out of it as an owner or as a general manager, you are not going to get rid of a player that you've signed to a long-term guaranteed contract. You are not going to eat all that money because of the player. So the onus falls on the head coach. The head coach, in most examples, in most situations in the NBA, is making far less than his star players are. You know, still pretty good coin if you can get it, but nowhere near what the elite superstar players are making in the NBA. So that kind of leverage, you know, that's what it is. It's leverage on the part of the players. They know that once they sign those long-term deals, they're set. You know, outside of, you know, setting the coach's hair on fire, and even then, maybe not. They're set. They're going to be there regardless of who the coach is. So that makes it much easier for them to exert that leverage, exert that influence when they're not happy with the coach. In the NFL, unheard of. The coaches reign supreme. The organizations reign supreme. Players have very little leverage, very little influence because they do not have that guaranteed money. They do not have those guaranteed contracts. It's just the way it's structured. And in Major League Baseball, they do have some guaranteed contracts, long-term contracts, but I think just the nature of the game, how quickly 1 minute a player can be at the top of his game, and almost in the blink of an eye, he's over the hill. So there's much less continuity with the players. You're not going to have, outside of a few very big name players in Major League Baseball, you're not going to have that ongoing, hey, well, I'm going to be here for the next 6 years. So I can dictate who the coach or who the manager is going to be. Also, within MLB, there are many more trades happening. In the NBA, trades are few and far between. You don't see it that much. In the MLB, it happens all the time. You have the trade deadline every year. You have free agency every year, where young up-and-coming players have put in their time. Now they qualify for free agency and they're ready to test the open market. So they're not in a position of, hey, this is my team. I'm going to make the decisions. I'm going to tell you who is going to be leading this team, who's going to be the manager of this ball club. It's just a completely different structure than what you see in the NBA. The NBA, again, guaranteed money for all of the players, not just stars, but throughout the league. That's what's happening. NFL, non-existent. And that's why you don't see players in the NFL being able to say, I don't really like the head coach. I think we need to make a change here. He'd be laughed out of the organization. No guaranteed money in the NFL. You have zero leverage, no leverage at all. You play as the team dictates, and that's it. And like I said, with MLB, it's a different type of ball game. Careers are very fleeting. You have a much larger talent pool coming in. Hundreds of players every year trying to make the major leagues. Thousands of prospects. But not so in the NBA. You have a handful of really great players, and they can dictate terms a lot of times as to who is going to be running the organization. So, that being said, I know that we in the NBA, it is a players' league. It is a talent-based, talent-driven league. And because of the guaranteed contracts, those that are the most talented possess the most leverage. But the question is it in their best interest? Is it in the game's best interest that they do this? To me, it doesn't make sense. When you look at it, even the greatest players, they're only going to be around at their peak, I would say, at the most 5 to 7 years. When you think about it, even the great ones, they start to lose a little something. Their value is diminished over time. So my question would be, if I'm running an organization and I'm looking for long-term success, continuity, consistency, there's no way you can achieve that if you got a player that is only going to be there for the most part at their peak 5 to 7 years, making the decisions, calling the shots about who is going to run the organization, who is going to run the team. It makes no sense. On top of that, players are extremely talented as players. That's what they're good at. They're good at playing the game, and that's what they should be focused on. They're not necessarily good at running an organization. They're not necessarily good at identifying talent. They're not necessarily good at identifying who should be the head coach in their organization. It doesn't make sense. Their skill set is involved in playing the game of basketball. They did not go to school to learn how to run an organization. They don't have years of experience evaluating talent. They don't have years of experience understanding the nuances of the game, the strategies in the game, to where they can be the ones that make the decisions about who is going to be the head coach of the organization. It just makes no sense at all. It's not, and it's really not in their best interest either, because they develop a reputation in the league as coach killers. They develop this reputation, and it diminishes their value. If you are a guy that was the top of your game, elite player, but you also developed a reputation as a coach killer, that's going to shorten your career, in my opinion, because people aren't going to forget. People are not going to forget that when you were on top, you used your power, you used your leverage in order for you to your personal gain, and they're not going to forget that. And as your talents diminish, as your physical talents diminish as a player, as your value diminishes as a player, the people in charge are going to remember that. They're going to remember, hey, you know what? Great player, but man, he did that guy dirty. He got that guy run out of town. And you know what they say about payback? When you no longer have that leverage and people realize you no longer have that leverage, it's adios, amigo. You're not going to be around. You're not going to get that extra year or two on that last contract to maximize your earning potential. It's not going to happen. Conversely, if you're a guy who is a star, is a superstar, an elite talent in the NBA, but you're also known as a guy that's a team guy that works with the organization, does his job, and does it the best he can, you're going to, as your talents diminish, you're going to add years to your career if you so desire. And that's, I think, where it kind of breaks down along these lines when I mention guys like James Harden and, Dwight Howard. There's going to come a day, and it's already starting to come for Dwight Howard, where you're not the player you once were. And when that happens, like I said, you no longer possess the leverage. And when that happens, it's going to be a real short period of time before you are out of this league. And, you look on the flip side, you look at people like Tim Duncan and Dwayne Wade, Chris Paul, Steph Curry. These are all guys that possess that elite level of talent. But as their careers progress, you look and see Tim Duncan. Now, if he had been a guy who had the talents he did at his peak, but he was also recognized as a coach killer, he would have been out of this league probably 2 or 3 years ago. But because he's willing to work with the team, work with the organization, be a part of the success, but not try to exert leverage where he doesn't need to or doesn't belong, his career is going to be extended. We can all agree that at this point in his career, Tim Duncan is not the player he once was, but he is still extremely effective, and he understands how to work in a team concept. Same goes for Dwayne Wade. He's still a great player, but he's not the player he once was. But again, he's learned to work with the organization and be part of that organization, understand his role in the organization. And I'm pretty sure that Dwayne Wade is going to be able to play as long as he wants to, because he's that kind of guy. Chris Paul, same thing. Same thing. A few years back, he was undoubtedly the top point guard in this league. Now he's among the top point guards in this league. But he's created a reputation that allows him to probably extend his career as long as he wants. And, Steph Curry's at the other end of the trail. He's just ascending to his greatness. But again, he appears to be the kind of guy that works with the organization, is a consummate team player, consummate leader, And if he so chooses, if he so desires, he's going to have an extremely long career, barring injury, because of the fact that he isn't looked at as a cancer, as he isn't looked at as a coach killer. And whether it's fair or not, people like James Harden, people like Dwight Howard are perceived that way. Supreme individual talents, not a team player, and some might even say a cancer, a coach killer. And you'll see, they'll be out of the league prematurely. They will not be here as long as they should be. And that's too bad for them. It's too bad for the league, because this league depends on having great talent and great leaders on teams that make it a more competitive league. So that's kind of where I stand. It's a little bit old school, I know. I know that in a players' league, you have to learn to work with your top players, and I think that's a definite ingredient. I also understand that there's a time that each coach has a shelf life with the team, and that when that shelf life expires, it is time for a change. It is time to move on. The league is different than it used to be. It's not like the NFL, where it's my way or the highway. You don't have a guaranteed contract. Don't try to use leverage that you don't have. And I know it has changed. The NBA is a different league. But it's still long term, if you look at it, it's not going to benefit the player, and it certainly isn't going to benefit the organization if a coaching change, a personnel decision, is based on what the player thinks. That player is here for X number of years. When he's gone, that organization is still going to have to try to succeed. So that's why you see organizations like San Antonio Spurs. You see organizations like the Golden State Warriors. You see organizations like the Miami Heat. The executives of those organizations understand that talent comes and goes, and they make sure the talent understands that. That, your day is here, you maximize your value, you do what's best for the team, and it cannot be on the court. Yes, the players are the league, but off the court, it's got to be the executives in charge of the organizations to make this work. It just doesn't work any other way long term. And like I said, players that exert that leverage, in the end, it comes back to bite them. It really does. Well, that's all I got for tonight. That was the topic. It's a little bit of a big picture, kind of a pullback. It's not the day's events like I've been normally doing, but I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I hope that you can comment on this for me, put your 2 cents in, like it if you like it, subscribe to it if you really enjoyed it. And like I said, I live for that input. I live for that feedback that you give me about the topics I come up with. I want them to be topics that are important to you as well as me, and that they're relevant to sports, because like I said, I have a passion for the sports. I want to share that passion with you here on Snyder on Sports. Thanks again. Have a great night. Take care, and God bless.